What's up guys, it's Matt B. Welcome back to another video, and today we're reviewing arguably the king of marathon race day shoes. My friends, today we are reviewing the Nike Alphafly 3. Let's get into it. Alright, let's get started with those disclosures. This video is in cooperation with my friends over at Roadrunner Sports, but as always they haven't told me what to say, they don't have any editorial privileges, and all the thoughts and opinions are my own. With that said, you can pick up a pair of the Nike Alphafly 3 for $285. And of course I'll place links in the show notes below in case you want to pick up a pair for yourself from Roadrunner Sports. You know, as a reviewer, when I get a shoe like the Alphafly 3 in, I imagine it's like the guys on Top Gear when they get some kind of hypercar, like a Bugatti or a McLaren. You know, maybe they've been driving around in a Toyota Corolla until that point. And if they have, when they get a chance to drive that hypercar, you can imagine it's pretty exciting. That's exactly how I feel about testing the Alphafly 3, and it didn't disappoint. But of course, let's get started with some specs and talk about the shoe itself, then we'll talk about the ride. Now, the Alphafly 3 has 40mm in the heel, 32mm in the forefoot for an 8mm drop. Nike claims that a US men's size 10 will tip the scale at 7.69 ounces or 218 grams. However, in my size, a US men's size 13, it tips the scale at 9.3 ounces or 265 grams. So this is the lightest Alphafly yet, and it really is very light. It feels light in my hands, it feels light on my foot. But let's get started at the top. We'll work our way down. Now, Nike is using their Atom Knit 3.0 upper. And basically, it's a one-piece knit upper. And guys, I almost feel bad saying it, but I think the Atom Knit upper could be my favorite part of the shoe. Now, that sounds ridiculous on a shoe like this, but I can say that the Atom Knit upper is just the right upper for all the technology that goes in down here, right? We always talk about the midsole being the magic of the shoe. Well, the Atom Knit 3.0 upper meets that magic head on, because this thing is a work of art. It is super light, it's super breathable. I'm going to hold it up. Obviously, I've got the Vault colorway. Now, you can't see through the shoe from the camera, but I can see the camera through the shoe. This thing is very airy. It's like a screen door. All the air is coming in. But a knit upper can sometimes be a bit sketchy. You know, when it gets wet, it sometimes stretches out. And I'm guessing Nike has combated that by making it a little rough. They've made this knit slightly more coarse than like a typical knit on a daily trainer. It's not soft at all. Probably wouldn't feel good to run bare feet in this shoe, but then really who's running bare feet in their running shoes? But I think the magic of the Atom Knit upper is how it hugs your foot and how they haven't needed too many overlays in order to give structure to the upper. So it is one piece. Looks like we've got a little bit of tape on the inside from about here all the way back. The heel counter is just a single piece of knit, and then just inside the heel counter there is some padding that runs from about here on the heel collar all the way around to the same place on the other side. So that back half of the heel collar is nicely padded. It's not nicely padded the way a daily trainer is nicely padded. It's definitely race day padded. Well, that's a nice way of saying minimal padding. But I didn't have any issues. Like, I put my foot in, the shoe felt snug all around, and I felt locked in. Now, the heel counter, if I do this, you can see that heel counter is really loosey-goosey, but then they have incorporated a fairly stiff piece, like a moderately stiff heel counter, coming about halfway up the heel to about here. You can see I'm pressing it down. And also, look at the shape of the back of the shoe. You see how this heel cup kind of leans forward? And that obviously is by design. I think Nike puts a bit of thought into this kind of thing. But when your heel goes into it, your heel sits back in the shoe, and then this nice soft padding around the heel collar pushes gently against your heel, giving you a good locked-in feel. So all that to say, I didn't experience any heel slip, no feeling of heel slip, and those two are different for me. Sometimes, although not often, I do get heel slip in a shoe and I have to use the lace lock method. More often, I experience a little looseness in the heel, and it feels like my heel could slip even though it doesn't. And that's the feeling I get with the Vaporfly. Not so with the Alphafly. I had a lovely heel lockdown. Now, as I've already said, we do have a one-piece knit upper, and Nike is using their lock laces, which is the laces with the little teeth on it. Really, I think these are the only laces necessary for any shoe that's used for racing, because it's the only way I can be absolutely confident that my laces aren't going to come untied. So what I'm saying is this shoe gives me a great lockdown, and I don't have to worry about my laces coming untied during the race. Furthermore, another problem that I've experienced in other shoes with a knit upper is that sometimes that knit upper kind of presses together and then buckles in the middle of the laces, you know, because there's just a little too much volume in here. That wasn't my experience with the Alphafly 3. For me, the upper fit perfectly, fit my foot perfectly. Now, I tend to think I have a somewhat narrow foot, so it does make me wonder how people with wider feet may deal with the Alphafly 3, just because if it fit my foot so well, it has the potential of being a little tight if you have a lot wider feet. I don't know. But I guess this review is my experience with the shoe, and for me, the lockdown, the lacing, the upper fit my foot like a dream. No complaints. Okay, let's come down to the midsole. And really, this is the magic of the shoe. The upper is fantastic, but honestly, we can work with a bad upper. We just don't have to in this case. The midsole is really where the action happens, and Nike is using their Zoom X foam. We all know Zoom X. It's light, it's responsive. Well, those are really the only two things we want in a race day super foam, and it is both of those things. Now, sandwiched in between the Zoom X foam, we have a carbon fiber fly plate, and we get a good look at the carbon fiber fly plate right here on the bottom, and then there is another little cutout right here on the forefoot that we can glimpse the front of it. Now, this is a good point to tell you that this is the first first Alphafly that I have run in. I didn't run in version 1. After seeing the reviews, I'm kind of glad I didn't run in version 2. So I was pretty excited to run in version 3, but there's a reason I didn't pick up version 1. And that's because the angle of the plate in the Alphafly is fairly flat. And you can kind of see, maybe it's difficult on camera, but the plate runs just on top of the Zoom AirPods, comes towards the back of the heel, and it comes straight back about halfway between the top and the bottom of the midsole foam. So it is a fairly straight plate. Like, it does dip down just a little bit, but ultimately it's not curved, especially when we compare it to the Vaporfly. And I have my pair of Vaporfly here. So let me just show you on this pair. The carbon fiber plate starts at about halfway between the top and the bottom of the midsole, just like on the Alphafly. And then in this little window here, you can see it turns sharply down to the forefoot. And then the carbon fiber plate is very close to the ground in the Vaporfly. That's really the difference between the two, and the main difference in how they ride differently. So because I am a heel striker, I always thought that the rolling motion of the Vaporfly and the position of the plate was going to be better for me. Okay, got that? Keep that in mind. And then of course, with the Alphafly, we have the carbon fiber plate. We've also got these 2 air zoom units, and I very much doubt this is the first Alphafly 3 video you've seen. So these are just little airbags, and they accentuate that energy return in the forefoot. So ultimately, the Alphafly is more made for midfoot to forefoot strikers than the Vaporfly. Or the Vaporfly does work well for midfoot and forefoot strikers, but if I had to say which one works better, I would say typically the Alphafly is going to work better if you land midfoot to forefoot. Remember? I don't. I'm a heel striker. But I'll tell you more about that when we talk about the ride. So now we've got the midsole and all the tech that goes inside the midsole. Let's come down to the outsole. We have a good amount of rubber here on the forefoot, a little bit of strategically placed rubber here on the heel. That's exactly as I would expect with any race day shoe. And I did run in this shoe in the wet. And I've got to say, I was pretty impressed with the grip. I didn't experience any sketchy moments when I thought I was going to slip. So the grip of the Alphafly 3 is spot on. I did run into one problem when I was running in the wet. And that is that when everything got wet inside, I noticed there was like a squeaking sound. And I did put out a short, maybe you saw it, and I actually thought that I had punctured one of the air zoom units. But actually what happened after a few more runs, I figured it out, especially when they were dry and they weren't making any noise, was that I think that because I was running in the wet, everything inside got wet and there was some kind of friction between the air zoom unit and the midsole foam, and with every footfall it was just kind of rubbing and creating friction and creating a sound. But when the shoes were dry, I didn't experience any of that. So just be aware, if you're running in the wet in the Alphafly 3, you may experience like a strange kind of air-like sound. It's nothing to worry about. Okay, so let's talk about ride. Now, this is a race day shoe, and in order to test it, I didn't take it out on any runs other than workouts. I also ran a race in the shoe. Now, Nike does claim that this is made for marathon speed, and the race I ran was not a marathon, but seeing as even my 5K pace is not anywhere near world record marathon pace, I don't think that really matters. Ultimately, this is a race day shoe. So I ran a lot of fast miles in this shoe, but I also use this shoe to warm up and cool down on those days when I was doing workouts. So I did run a couple of miles at an easy pace. And you know what I'm going to say, the shoe does not run as well slow as it does fast, right? No surprises there. In fact, I'd even go so far as to say that you're wasting this shoe if you're running easy in it. Like, it feels good under my foot, everything was flowing nicely, but when I'm running easy, and I'm heel striking a lot more when I'm running easy, it just felt a little soft. Now, when I started picking up the pace, that's when the shoe really comes alive. And look, I almost feel bad saying it because this is a sample. I was sent this shoe for review, so I didn't spend $285. But if you can swing it, I think buying a solid super shoe is worth the money. And I know this is going to be different for everyone, but the feeling that you get from, we're talking about the Alphafly 3 today, but I'm talking about super shoes in general, the feeling that you get from running in a super shoe, for me personally, is worth that investment. And the Alphafly 3 was one of those shoes that felt magic when I started picking up the pace. So even though I always thought that this shoe was not ideal for me, and I'm realizing now that it probably isn't ideal for me, but even though it's not ideal, it still feels fantastic. It feels fast. It gives me that extra energy return that I'm looking for when I'm trying to pick up the pace on intervals, especially on race day. When I start to pick up the pace, I do start to land more midfoot. So that's when I started noticing the energy return from these air zoom units. And when I was racing, I kind of found that I could tune my brain into the shoe to think about my feet and what they were doing and how they were hitting the ground and how they were helping moving me forward, because there was a definite benefit from running in the Alphafly 3. Now, I know several of you watching this video have probably run in this shoe, and I definitely want to hear from you. I want to hear your experience when using the Alphafly 3 for races. So drop a comment and let me know. So I guess in summary, this shoe is actually everything that you expect it to be. This is definitely a hype shoe, and I think the Alphafly 3 actually lives up to that hype. Of course, it helps that the fastest marathon time in the world was running it, but even putting that aside, this shoe is a solid piece of kit. And if you have a chance to run in it, I don't know, again, I feel bad kind of recommending people to spend so much money on a pair of shoes, so I'm not going to do that. but I am going to say the shoes do make a difference. They're light and they're fast, and I think you'll like them. Now, just quickly before I wrap up this video, if I had the choice to run a marathon in the Vaporfly or the Alphafly, which would I choose? And that's a little bit of a tricky question. I would have no problem running a marathon in the Alphafly, but I still think when it comes down to it, I would probably choose the Vaporfly, and that is solely because of the position of the plate. And I think after 3 hours of running in a marathon, I'm going to be pretty tired. When I get tired, I tend to heel strike more. I think the Vaporfly is a little more forgiving for heel strikers. The Vaporfly has more of a rolling motion, whereas the Alphafly has more of a compress and bounce up motion. Does that make sense? If not, I'm happy to clarify in the comments. And with that, it's Matt B. This has been my review of the Nike Alphafly 3. Be kind, be happy, run well. I'll see you in a couple of days.